Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another season of the AI Healthcare Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Reed, and today we are joined with my friend, Jim St. Clair, who is the co-founder of MyLego. Thank you so much for your time today, Jim.
Hi, Dylan. It's great to be here today. And I'm also very happy to be able to promote my relationship with the Mississippi Coding Academies. And I work there as the chief AI officer and talk a bit about that too.
Awesome. No, looking forward to the discussion. So the first question that I wanted to ask you is, how did you get into the AI healthcare field in general?
Yeah, great. I've kind of felt like I've wandered into it, but I think there's a lot of us that have kind of wandered into it. Really, I've been involved in health IT for about 13 years or so, with previous roles as director of interoperability and standards at HIMSS and working for various companies in health IT. And of course, now AI is beginning to permeate technology infrastructure so much across so many sectors and be evaluated. And so kind of just woke up into that role. And in my current role with the Mississippi Coding Academies, working on developing AI curriculum for our student population as a nonprofit serving students in Mississippi. And of course, in looking at AI curriculum and understanding how to teach AI courses and where AI is going to benefit businesses directly with healthcare, there's relationships with healthcare data and AI applications, and be able to then translate, okay, well, what do you have to learn about AI and what are things to consider in AI applications for healthcare? So I think there's myself and a whole lot of folks that I know that have kind of moved into this healthcare and AI space because that's the trend where everything is going.
And you bring up a great segue into a question that I wanted to ask. So what is the general if you could just give us like a 10,000-foot overview of what is AI education currently like right now in the state of Mississippi?
That's a great question. We have a couple exciting initiatives. One is called MAIN, which is the Mississippi AI Network. This is a collaboration between several of the four-year colleges, the SEC members, several of the other universities, and several of the community colleges. And they are beginning to look at how to basically integrate, collaborate on curriculum, where you can imagine, of course, that to have an AI education, so to speak, and something that we've been digging into quite a lot for the last 9 months, there's foundations in things like databases and things like statistics, things like math and algebra. All of these are building blocks to be able to understand what it means to get into, say, coding Python and building Python libraries or PyTorch, which are fundamental to using AI and ML applications. So there's quite a bit along the way for any student. Obviously, with advances in AI coding tools and copilots, that's going to change in the future. But the necessity is really, if you're going to understand AI and ML from a coding perspective and from an education perspective, there's a lot of foundations to math and data science that go with that too.
And what has been the general reaction from key stakeholders in the state in the implementation of this technology, specifically in the healthcare field?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. It is a learning and education problem for well, not a problem, but a challenge for all businesses in the state, businesses in the U.S., and specific to healthcare, of course, as I'm sure you've talked about several times before. The challenges of the regulatory environment, of the medical responsibilities and licensing responsibilities of healthcare professionals and clinicians when they're delivering care, how they're using AI, understanding where AI is being used in the process to help make clinical decisions or support information flow, and et cetera. And so, not to say that there aren't challenges in, say, the energy sector for adopting AI or the retail sector, but healthcare, of course, is very unique since much of it boils down to issues of patient safety and care delivery.
Mm-hmm. And specifically with your knowledge and expertise in the state of Mississippi, what have you seen, either particular initiatives or particular questions, or what key stakeholders are doing in like the big areas of like Biloxi, Starksville, Oxford, just to name a few?
Yeah, great question. So what we're starting to see is growth with companies, technology companies already here in Mississippi, many of which may be offering their services outside of Mississippi to other companies and other organizations. and developing their workforce in AI education, in developing AI applications, and then offering that as a service as part of their business line to their customers.
Mm-hmm. And how has working with Jackson been in relation to kind of getting this off the ground and running in the state?
Yeah, so Innovate Mississippi, which is the Jackson-based program that's part of Mississippi government, is very supporting both in terms of innovation programs as well as to the Mississippi Coding Academy. They are really trying to lead the way in developing a new frontier of innovation and innovation companies and startups and health tech in Mississippi. And hand in hand with that is supporting programs like the Mississippi Coding Academy so that we ensure we have a Mississippi-based ready workforce to support this new generation of innovation that we're trying to develop from the corporate standpoint.
Awesome. So yeah, just to kind of a little bit about my personal story. So I remember as a kid we used to drive from Texas to Florida for our family vacations, and we used to drive I-10. I-10 was that big interstate that I remember as a kid. We would go through like
it is still the only interstate.
Biloxi. And what I remember vaguely was it was a big oil and natural gas area, and there was that was kind of really what drove the state, and not excluding timber, which is also a huge a huge economic boost to the state. But how are you starting to see the shifts from kind of those two staple industries to kind of the shift towards AI technology in the state of Mississippi?
Yeah, great question. We do have some refinery work with Chevron, but our industrial base specific to the coast of Mississippi is pretty diverse. We have several large military installations. We have one of a handful of the largest shipyards in the country with a specific focus around U.S. Navy shipbuilding and U.S. Coast Guard. We also have an enormous service economy since we have more casinos east of the Mississippi than anywhere else in the U.S. And we're also starting to see a bit more of a shift logistically because we have both the Port of Gulfport, train hubs coming through, et cetera. And there's degrees of modernization to all of them. Of course, also Hancock Whitney Bank, which is now I think the 30th largest bank in the country. There's been technology shifts to all of them and shifts in innovation. So, we're trying to stay engaged with that, much like we are characterizing what we're doing in Jackson and the relationship to Innovate Mississippi. There's a unique culture and corporate base here in the coast as well that we're trying to address with that. So really, I guess in many respects, just like other parts of the country, more of a knowledge economy, more of a shift to technology, empowering things that's moving things here on the coast, just like they are elsewhere, either in the state or other parts of the country.
Wow. And, specifically on the healthcare side, like doctors and like hospital systems, are they pretty much on board too as well? Or is it kind of a little bit of a tug of war from kind of what you've been seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I belong to a couple of organizations such as CHI, the Coalition for Healthcare AI, and a few others. And we are examining specific use cases where healthcare organizations have really done their own thing in AI, have in many cases developed their own AI applications or finding new use cases for that application. And one of the things we're trying to do is develop some standards and some guidelines, some recommendations, some best practices so that any healthcare organization can look at these use cases and be able to leverage those to pick up and try on their own. We have a couple large health systems here. We also border with Ochsner Health in New Orleans, which of course is a huge health system through Louisiana and into the western part of the state. And they have several significant digital innovation programs that are ongoing, several of which then involve AI and, of course, telemedicine and other things. And we're starting to adopt some of that as well. And really looking to be able to see if we could have a kind of a reference library, best practices and use cases that healthcare organizations could go to and kick the tires on their AI application.
And kind of shifting the conversation a little bit so you have all this infrastructure that you're building. How has it been trying to convince people to stay in Mississippi for these jobs? Because based off of my research, it's a mass, more people are leaving the state than they are moving into the state. Has that been a challenge?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a challenge yet because we deal with quite a few students and look to onboard new students as well at the coding academies that really, quite frankly, want to stay here. They have family here. There is certainly a percentage of people at various age groups here in Mississippi, as well as other states, that look to be mobile and relocate. I would offer part of our challenge that we try to address is that we can find students, we can educate students and make them into effective coders and programmers. And then the next step from there is, well, where can I find a good job to do this? We do have a certain percentage of these students that we empower with these abilities and that are great students and learn very well. And then they move on to, San Francisco or Seattle or New York, because that's where the opportunity is. And in many cases, a well-funded opportunity. But we are trying to focus on those students that we're trying to focus on opportunities for those students that are also committed to stay. They have family, they have ties into the community. And so it's good not only for economic growth and development within the state, but also having places for people that want to learn, advance their careers, and still stay here to be able to work.
Mm-hmm. And, off that point, where do you see the Mississippi Coding Academy? Like, how do you see it pushing the conversation forward to the greater conversation we're talking about with AI in healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would like healthcare organizations in Mississippi to be able to look to the coding academies as their first and best resource for trained developers, coders, and programmers to be able to work on AI in-house. And I think in there is a point I'd like to emphasize, which is there is so much, I think, of a understanding or interpretation around AI being Gen AI and working with Microsoft Copilot, or of course OpenAI and ChatGPT. AI is developing as a field around software that's developed specifically for an organization, using that organization's data. And of course, one of the most important places to do that is in healthcare and data that health systems have. So we would like to be able to offer resources in healthcare AI where healthcare organizations in Mississippi, and even outside of Mississippi, of course, come to us for those developer resources and trained resources to help them work with their own data and implement their own in-house AI solution, which is kind of a general trend I've seen with other healthcare organizations and health systems that are researching and developing AI.
Okay, so it's like, for example, let's just say like a health problem in Mississippi and is like heart disease. So Mississippi Coding Academy would be able to work with hospitals or with doctors for them to help them figure out a way, like, okay, we have this health solution, or excuse me, this health problem. What is the solution to help treat this particular population within the state who are impacted by heart disease? Is that kind of where you hope the Mississippi Coding Academy kind of makes its mark?
Yeah, I'd break it down a little more. So let's use heart disease as the use case. We would obviously expect that medical professionals and providers and clinicians in Mississippi would, take a look at the data they have around heart disease, try and understand what are some mitigation strategies that we want to develop, or new preventative care strategies based on what the data tells us or what we think the data can tell us. And then working in conjunction with them, we offer the programming resources to be able to actually develop the applications that use the data in the way that the clinicians desire to give them the outputs and the answers. I do think that there's some room for us to be able to obviously explain the principles of AI, help them understand some of the aspects of how AI applications are developed, the use of data sets and models, to help guide their thinking around what their desired outcomes are for, the heart disease use case. And most importantly, make sure that between both groups that we recognize that the data is well represented, that it's transparent, that there aren't any inherent biases in terms of the data that's been collected or not properly reflecting a population, or that the research and clinical trials on information that has been done before doesn't accurately reflect the Mississippi population that we're concerned with. So all of that are ways that I think we can look at the problems and then leverage our students from the coding academies to be able to assist them with actually developing the applications.
Awesome. And that leads into my next question nicely. So you're also heavily involved in specifically healthcare and economic development in rural America and Appalachia. And how have you seen AI in healthcare impact either positively or negatively these respective regions?
Yeah, great question. I don't think they have yet, and thanks for the nod there. Yeah, I've had the pleasure to work with several colleagues around healthcare and the economic impact of healthcare in Appalachia in the U.S., as well as participate in several global health fora discussing health IT and economic impacts of health, especially in the global South, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. It's very interesting to make the contrast as, both continents trying to adopt new health IT, the challenges of being resource constrained, the longer term demographic shift and demographic problems of aging populations, of not having enough resources. And I think both continents have challenges that are very similar to be considered. And I think AI can plug a gap. I was just in a work group today bantering about, I like to take the controversial position that says AI will replace doctors. And I generally say that right after somebody offers the position that, well, of course, AI will never replace doctors. In the course of 5 to 10 years, we're going to have very significant demographic gaps across the board globally for clinician resources, especially specialty clinician resources. All of us see right now problems we might have with how long it takes to see a dermatologist in certain areas or a cardiologist in many cases. We're going to have to look to AI over the course of the next 5 to 10 years to find ways to certainly augment that, and in some places supplant it, at least for a first line of defense. And that applies to, obviously rural areas like Mississippi, Appalachia, areas in sub-Saharan Africa, the middle of the country in the Midwest and out to the West. So now the time is now to figure some of these things out with AI and begin that roadmap so that we're not trying to address it as a crisis later.
Yeah. And, you bring up a great point, what I've read, it's just even getting telehealth out to these parts of rural America. That's been a battle within itself.
Yeah, and I apologize for not having the numbers, but there has been some good news stories there. The various programs, both in the Inflation Reduction Act as well as prior to that, for broadband grants and broadband services, has expanded a lot of broadband access dramatically. There are problems though, because some of the broadband subsidies that have been used in rural America to not only give broadband to people, but allow them to be able to afford it on a monthly basis through subsidies is being hindered, just at a point when there has been more adoption of telehealth and telehealth services. I know of several critical access hospitals in Appalachia that have recently gotten high-speed fiber bandwidth to their fiber optic bandwidth to their hospital to be able to leverage that for telehealth. And so it's still an opportunity to develop in a lot of cases.
And what from your experience, what you in Mississippi is a common question that you hear from people. Is it like, well, I have all of these larger cities around me. Like I have Atlanta, I have Nashville, I have Miami, I have Dallas, I have Houston, I have Baton Rouge, I have New Orleans. They're like, why don't I just, why can't I just move there if all the infrastructure is over there? Like, is kind of the migration of healthcare workers? Has that been a something that you closely monitor within the state?
No, but it's a good question. But I think I would offer that it's less about that kind of migration and it's across the board challenges. I think you could pick up, the listed vacancies for health systems in any of those places you named. And if anything, in the more urban areas, it's even more challenging because they are set out within a dense urban population to have, let's just say, as an arbitrary number, 500 clinicians. And maybe they only currently have 350 or 400 and just can't fill that last 100. If you're serving in an area where there's only, say, 2 or 3 clinicians per county or per square area, if you only find one, then you've replaced, 75% of what you're looking for, or 100% of what you're looking for. That's not always the case in the larger urban areas, plus the degree of specialties that may be required. So it's really a mixed bag in terms of the types of clinicians and medical specialties in need, and then just geographically where you're at.
Awesome. No, that's very enlightening. But I do got to ask you, being in Mississippi, college football kind of reigns king. So I got to ask, how do you think Hotty Toddy is going to do this year?
Oh yeah, I think Ole Miss has got a great team. That was a pretty stunning performance that they had this past week against Furman, and I think that Coach Lane Kiffin has done a lot to be able to align the team not only for this year in terms of players, but as we talked about before the podcast, the NIL rules and how to take advantage of that and maximize the team participation. So it should be a good season. Hotty Toddy.
Yeah. And I'm not an Ole Miss fan, but I'm always a little nervous because I never know what team is going to show up. Like they can be really, really good, or they can just fall flat.
Yeah, good point. I think the one thing under Coach Kiffin the last couple of years has been greater consistency on a week-to-week basis, and that's probably what's kept them higher up in the rankings so far.
Yeah, and that cheer, the old flap, flim flam. I don't know the rest of the words to it, but it's like I don't even know what that means, but it means something to Ole Miss.
That's okay, back to the drunken crowds of the 1800s. So.
But my last question is, what do you think that elected officials need to understand about initiatives like the Mississippi Coding Academy that could actually help make the United States more innovative moving forward?
Yeah, I think we, of course, are a nonprofit. We are not an educational institution, but as a nonprofit institution, obviously offering professional courses. There's a lot to tap into there. And I think that there are probably avenues or mechanisms in other states similar to the coding academies that they can build upon, where we are geographically focused to address students that may not have the opportunity to participate in training like this elsewhere. And of course, it is rightfully not integrated into every K through 12 curriculum and represents a whole nother kind of organizational challenge if you're trying to do it in 2-year and 4-year colleges. So we offer kind of a unique niche in that regards. There are probably similar sorts of organizations that could do that in other places. I know of some other programs that go on to try and offer that, especially things like hackathons and codathons, where they're trying to develop populations and underserved students. But we think it's a great model, and it's a model that other states could certainly adopt for sure.
Awesome. And where can people, Jim, find more about you as well as the Mississippi Coding Academy?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and Mississippi Coding Academies is at, I believe it's mscoding.org.
Awesome. And be sure to subscribe to the AI Healthcare Podcast on YouTube, also available on Spotify and Apple Podcast too as well. This is Dylan Reed signing off. Thank you so much again for your time today, Jim.
Thanks, Dylan.